Welcome back. Now, Kenya's economy is ranked highest overall in terms of the COVID-19 risk with a score of 27 points, followed by Ghana on 24, Egypt 23. African economies which are least risk in terms of the virus include Mozambique, Nigeria, with a looming lockdown in the country as hinted by CS Mutahi Kagwe. How will the government deploy the correct amount of resources, a social support system, and a political will to see Kenyans through, with no new cases reported and the number standing at 7? Can the country's healthcare system last the whole course and the length of the crisis? The number is 0791478990. The hashtag on Twitter is NewDayKE. The short SMS code is 40920. The social distancing edition of New Day Kenya this Monday morning, 23rd of March 2020. Dr. Justice Juma joins me, the leader, Justice and Freedom Party of Kenya, and equal commentator on affairs in regards to politics and governance issues. Good morning, Daktari. I appreciate your time. Qualifies to say Happy New Year.
Oh, yes. And,
we haven't had you.
Of course, and I've come with grasshoppers and coronavirus.
And all this facing Kenyans. But there is hope at the end of the tunnel.
Of course.
Based on how we handle this. Sometimes challenges can be an opportunity, based on how you look at it.
Okay. Now, of course, we'll be talking. Yes, of course, we'll be taking a look at the economy in regard to the risk exposure by the coronavirus pandemic, which equally is translatable at the global context in regard to what the United Kingdom government, the US, has done, what we can do in terms of the stimulus package that the Central Bank of Kenya needs to do, what the government needs to adopt in terms of the measures that Kenyans, in terms of gracing period of the coronavirus pandemic, and equally take a look at the bulk of the Kenyan workforce. But before we do that, we have a soundbite from the CS Mutahi Kagwe, who yesterday issued a presser in the country in regard to the regular updates that he continues to offer to Kenyans as part of his, of course, mandate or authority and responsibility, which Kenyans gave him as part of the coronavirus pandemic. And yesterday he confirmed 8 more cases in the country, and the number climbs to 15 owing to the other 7. Then that totals up to 15 as the government now puts in place more measures, stringent measures that will affect the churches, mosques, other religious centers in the country, social gatherings, and equally travel, tourism bans across the country, sporting events cancelled. And this is what CS Mutahi Kagwe had to say yesterday at Harambee House in Nairobi County.
All the 8 are imported cases from Europe and America. The ages are between the age of 20 for the youngest and 57 years for the oldest. All the patients, except the one who is at the coast, at Msambweni, are all in stable condition. The government is organizing to having the patients in Msambweni airlifted to Nairobi for further treatment. There are those who not only want to put themselves in harm's way, but also put other people who are completely innocent in harm's way. And I think allowing them is what we are saying we cannot do. Biggest enforcers are the people themselves. Yes, police will henceforth patrol, and make sure that people are adhering to the law. But we cannot have a policeman for every person. This is a place where citizen responsibility, as I've continued to say, citizen responsibility is the key to the success of this initiative. This is meant to secure the social distance requirement, noting that the increased risk of transmission that those facilities can cause.
I think the plans that are in place by government now is pleasing. What we want to do is to urge the county governments also to prepare. A county like Siaya, where I come from, I'm not even sure if they have already secured places where people who have been detected with coronavirus can be kept, isolation places. I don't think this is very substantial, but I think the government is doing enough. The CS for health is actually on the front line, leading in the process of managing the disease, and I think Kenyans should just cooperate.
Hii ugonjwa I respect anyone, mkubwa, mdogo, mjumbe, kina nani, wote. Kwa hivyo hata sisi tunasikia lazima tuwe cautious na zile vitu zote tunafanya, kusalimiana sasa hakuna handshake anymore. Kwa hivyo tunasema Mungu anafanya maneno yake.
As Kenyans, individually you must be prepared. We don't want to leave it just to the government itself. It is everybody's responsibility to ensure that you take and participate in the issue of ensuring that the spread is completely minimized or rather eradicated. But of course we are happy and we are telling all Kenyans to be extra careful and get involved in measures that the government is floating. Most important is the hygiene issue.
We cannot say that governments, from county governments to national governments, no effort has been made. Effort is being made. So let us all try and pull ourselves together as Kenyans and try to do this together. We know that schools have been closed, our children are home. It is not easy to control how children interact with each other, but let's keep encouraging as parents, children to keep washing their hands.
Those are some of the members of parliament who spoke to our reporters in regard to COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And alongside Dr. Justice Juma is Areba Omoyo Samba, advocate of the High Court, commentator on governance and political issues. Good morning, Areba.
Good morning.
I appreciate your time. Asante sana for coming. A lot to discuss. Of course, we are now into the economic perspective of the coronavirus pandemic. Starting off with you, Dr. Juma, in regard to societies that we have seen, of course, that are advanced, for instance, in the UK, and in terms of what you have heard from the Minister, Mutahi Kagwe, who hinted at some point at a lockdown, will the government in future determine, aside from the democratic element, how we live, where to go, and generally how to be in an attempt to prevent the spread of the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, for purposes of prevention, we've seen how this thing actually has brought down to their knees some other strong nations whom we've actually strong economies whom we've been looking up to globally. And looking at how they've dealt with it, China has demonstrated how you can handle these things. Though theirs was a bit harsh and more like abused a lot of rights, but prevented lives. And looking at a Kenyan scenario, vis-a-vis the mitigative measures that other states are taking, we are having a big challenge. And I know the questions that is dwindling in the minds of majority is whether the government has the capacity to do social mitigation, probably economical. I know some people are asking for, let's not pay rent for the period, the 2 months period, or specific economic or financial support directly, as the US is doing, sending money directly to its citizens. I know that's a bit of a challenge, but it's possible based on the management. This is where actually leadership is called to the test. If a leader really feels it's their people, because mostly the economy of a country gravitate around the government.
Okay.
And right now the government has shut down. Government workers and employees are not working. Offices are closed. Actually, almost everything, as we're talking right now, has come to a standstill, apart from private businesses which are running here and there. And without that, definitely all these other economies are affected. And with that effect, how will they mitigate? Because seriously, you can only stay at home if your welfare is taken care of. Some of those people said, actually, I saw a comment of a lady saying that our worst nightmare actually is not corona, is how to feed her children. And if she doesn't feed them, they'll die either way. So she'd rather die with the corona outside trying to feed her children than staying indoors without food to give them.
Okay, and you speak about the essence of perhaps the demography of the Kenyan workforce, and of course, in a gig economy, many Kenyans depend on digital platforms. I mean, the online taxi drivers, you talk about the deliveries that are done online, and then the informal sector, Kenyans, majority of Kenyans who live hand to mouth. How is it translatable them in terms of now mobilizing that resource and showing the good political will in the country for the government not only to navigate Kenyans through these trying times, but equally make sure that Kenyans are comfortable at their level? Which is
the best alternative so far, using online platform as an alternative to physical or going to work. But how many Kenyans can afford that, Ayub? I think probably around 25%.
Okay.
And How about the remaining 75%? So yes, some urgent mitigative measures needs to actually take place. And yes, the government should, at this moment, collaborate, even globally, with the international community. You know, these are where ICC ought to have come in for affirmative action. Because some of these causes, I hear Trump call it China virus, and China calls it American soldiers.
Sort of the political proxy war.
There's some, political proxy war about all these scenarios. And who suffers the most? Undeveloped economics. So these are the moments when even the AAU, the United Nations, should come together and put in place mechanisms that mitigate, especially the weak and the vulnerable, in developing economy.
Okay.
To also have easy life, just like you see, America straight away, they're sending actually financial support straight to people's accounts. So when they're telling their people to quarantine and stay at home, it makes a lot of sense because some of their needs are taken care of.
Okay.
But in our case, our governments need to step up with the little that we have, but also look up, even in a united approach, to get better stake in assorting this thing, especially in relationship with the source of this pandemic.
Okay, given that, and also worth mentioning that the government in the UK has granted to cover 80% of the salary of workers up to about £2,500 in the United Kingdom, which is, of course, a relief which is enough to take them through the period. Areba Omoe Samba, good morning.
Morning to you.
When you hear CS Mutahi Kagwe Health, he hints about a lockdown. He says that we need to learn lessons from Italy and Japan are the countries that have misjudged the situation. And we have seen the level of devastation of the coronavirus pandemic. And despite the skepticism and, of course, the sort of uncertain expression by the World Health Organization on China's quarantine lockdown model, there were no reported new cases in China. Therefore, is that more or less a protocol that Kenya will observe in an attempt to contain the virus in the country, owing to the acknowledgement and what we know of our healthcare system and the status?
Well, it's quite a devastating moment for any country, and more so for the developing nations. First of all, the issue of a lockdown, it's something that is on the cards as we are speaking right now. But then a very critical issue comes up. Will we be able to manage a lockdown? Which really is a conversation that we're trying to toy around. I mean, the way Dr. Arias said is that we have a huge population of people who are not even concerned about what is going on. For them, they are concerned about putting food on the table.
What to eat.
What to eat. I was having a conversation with some casual workers in Eldoret yesterday, and for them, what they're saying is, wacha hiyo corona ikuje tupate kama tunatafutia watoto wetu. So, and yesterday I did put up a post and say that the weakest link are people who are trying to pay their bills, pay their utilities, and put food on the table. If then we can be able to work around that, then we are able to toy with the idea of a lockdown. If you compare what the fiscal kind of advice that was given last week and the fiscal policy that was given by the Bank of Mauritius, then you realize what we are talking about. In Mauritius, the central bank did direct that banks need to engage and provide tax holidays and provide holidays for mortgages and other loans for a period of, 2 or 3 months. But what happened in Kenya was a mere advice that banks and financial institutions need to engage with their members with a way of trying to restructure their responsibilities. And the weakest link, as we are speaking right now, is how to be able to contain that economic downfall. Remember that if right now we are told that nobody is supposed to come out of the house, what happens to people who feed from hand to mouth? Even if that one notwithstanding, even some of us who try to run some kind of small and medium enterprises, we are already receiving a hit because we have not been trading for the last 1 or so weeks. How will we be able to pay salaries? And that is why now the government needs to come in with a very strong fiscal policy. If at all we are going to have a lockdown, even if we are not going to have a lockdown, already as we are speaking right now, the economy is really having a hit, and there needs to be a way of trying to salvage it.
Okay, and of course, generally when you take a look at that, it's part of the global, what appears to be a recession according to financial analysts, as per, of course, the pause in production in China, which has affected its biggest trading partner in Africa. And countries in the African continent trade more with China than they trade amongst themselves or intra-trade African relations. But Daktari, let's now flip and have this philosophical debate about the type of the political nature of the regime, whether authoritarian, dictatorship, communist / democracy or socialist state. But China managed to contain the virus. Of course, it's a one-man show in China, right, part of the People's Governing Party of China under President Xi Jinping. The debate now has shifted from the critical factor to now a praise for President Xi Jinping's government and the authorities in Beijing, notwithstanding the propaganda. Is it more or less more easier to control the pandemic in a communist or a dictatorship state than in a socialist or democratic state?
Well, it's relative. It's relative in the fact that still there are certain sources that say that probably the figures that we're dealing with from China might not truly be the actual figures that are the actual scenario on the ground. Some are bringing clips of mobile users stating that probably 8.1 million users are not using the mobile system so far since this pandemic began. So in other words, it could be related to either they changed their handset to other mobile operators, or probably they're dead. Well, some are insinuating
more or
like
less the censorship
exactly.
That's in China.
Yeah, so the actual the number of the effect in China, it does not really come out clearly. But Ayub, see, also we need to understand what we're dealing with. Corona virus disease, COVID-19, that we're dealing with began in China, isn't it?
Yep.
And COVID, some people actually have theorized to link it with 5G that actually originated from where? From China itself, right? And in Kenya, I think 5G cable arrived in Kenya by around 25th of February.
That is in 2020.
And yeah, just the other day, February 2020, just the other day. And actually before then, we had no case whatsoever.
Well, so
comically enough.
So more or less it's traceable to China.
Well, those are theories that can be pieced in together. And initially, it was along the areas or states which actually had encountered or installed 5G networks. I don't know how it is linked, but theory says that the 5G actually operates around 60 gigabytes. 60 gigabytes, if you compare probably to microwaves oscillate at around 24 gigabytes, which heats...
That's about almost twice.
Which heats the water to a boiling point. And you find a 60 gigabytes oscillating, that frequency oscillating within your atmosphere, the possibility of it actually exhausting and extincting hydrogen or the air that we breathe, the chances are very high that that is possible. And some are linking this flu, because they're saying it's pneumonic, isn't it? It's a case where your lung just stop. And could it be stopping because of lack of oxygen? Could it be stopping? And those are the things we're pushing scientists to bring out so that we understand clearly how this happens. The case where your lung ceases to have proper breathing process, it is something that could be linked. And this is not a new theory, because if you go beyond, this was in 1985 when P.W. Botha was making a speech in his cabinet regarding how they were going to deal or combat the black community. And they said they are going to put up various measures, and they're not going to use atomic bomb. They're going to use scientific, they're going to use a chemical, they're going to use biological, some were social, some were even poisons in their soft beverages. And by and large, certain confirmations or testaments have confirmed that some things, such things occurred. And some would even trace HIV to those sources. We have issues of economic hitmen. So global wars and these political initiatives that are running and people fighting against each other, because as we're talking right now, no one can even now lift their hair to talk about what is happening in the Middle East. Just the other day, you saw what is happening in Syria and Palestine. And right now, no one can talk about what is happening in Iran. Everybody is talking about Corona. And these are...
More or less, are you alluding more or less to what appears to be the agenda-setting part of the global community and the proxy wars?
Exactly,
like
and ruling with fear. Look at how fear has captivated people. And to a point, and this is where now the government should come in, because this is a challenge, of course, as we're dealing with it, and it's accompanied or comes with a lot of fear. How can you come in to mitigate and save your people against such wars that are escalating globally or even locally? So if we do not have proper mechanism and even preparation measures, and this is why sometimes we challenge our education systems, because in such cases you also need countermeasures in terms of experts or researchers. By now we should be having our own vaccines. If those are those could be the true theories.
Okay.
But without that in place, then the society is left again so vulnerable, so open, without actual proper education and sensitization, which right now need to move out and remove fear, but still educate the citizen to be able to deal with this thing in a manner that can move us forward.
Okay, and that of course depends on how we scale up our innovation, our research, and a Kenyan doctor or Kenyan doctors are part of the team globally that were tasked by the World Health Organization to develop a vaccine for this virus. But the reality is that at the end of the day, it will go just like the swine flu in 2009, but it's inevitable. Then we'll have another pandemic going forward, because we have had that in history. 1918-19 Spanish influenza, then came the heat wave of 2003, the SARS and the MERS the same year, and the heat wave actually killed 70,000 people.
Unfortunately, they're all linked to American elections.
Okay, well, that's a factor that Donald Trump will consider in his electioneering period in 2020. But in terms of the Kenyan context, still, Areba Omoe Samba Wakili with you, the concern for Kenyans is that in the event of a lockdown, what happens then? How do we inject the economy with a stimulus package, especially from the Central Bank of Kenya, money that needs to keep circulating? And in the liquidifying process, how does the government consider the disparities that were laid forth by this pandemic, the haves and the haves not, and that gap that unfortunately continues to grow between the common citizen and the Kenyans who have what it takes in terms of the resources and wealth?
Two issues I will consider first. We all talking about the healthcare system as a primary thing. Remember that some people were arguing yesterday that even in developed countries, they are receiving a hit, even with their well-developed healthcare systems. But then I sat down and asked myself, if then we are saying that the United States and Italy, with their superior healthcare systems, are receiving a hit, then what will happen if it really hits as well? In a country where we jail doctors, in a country where the primary healthcare system is something that looks like a joke. And this is an indictment in terms of our systems. We don't need to come up and invest in our systems when we are faced with a calamity. We need to continuously ensure that the social systems, be it security, be it education, be it healthcare, they're up to par to deal with any calamity or any pandemic that might arise at any particular time. It doesn't help that when we have the mentality of vyombo vya wageni, in that now the wageni is like the pandemic. That is the now when we are trying to get off our oxygen machines and very nice beds and a tour of us trying to now develop the healthcare system. I mean, it's some kind of mediocrity which I can say that doesn't need to really be given space in our current setup. Let us always be ready to deal with any eventualities that might always come. Remember that we invest, or rather we say that we have invested a lot in health. Last week when I was here, I was trying to tell you guys about the way counties are trying to shame units. Yeah, the way counties are trying to shame themselves in terms of what they have as the corona preparedness. And most interestingly is that one county did give a tour of their renal unit and then tried to fool people that, hey, this is our isolation unit. And people were quick to come out and say, hey, but you launched this as a renal unit a year ago. Why are you again launching it as an isolation unit? So that kind of mentality of vyombo vya wageni, in that when something is coming, that is when the moment we're trying to run and invest in it. Let us sit down and invest in our primary healthcare systems. Let's ensure that we are ready in everything that we do. Because if we are not ready to deal with the slightest issue in the healthcare system, how are we going to deal with this pandemic of Ebola, of COVID? Then the second issue in terms of the economy, we have had endless conversation about how the economy has always been on the downward on this particular panel. And this is coming at not a very good time in our economy setup. Remember that we have been talking about issues of unemployment, the issues of the ever-increasing gap of the haves and the have-nots. Okay. And then now we have been hit. The moment we are being hit is the moment when our trading patterns and our import and export, there's a lot of disparity. Then it comes to the question from maybe somebody with the monetary field can help us answer. What needs to happen at this particular time? And I'll provide, although I'm not a financial expert, I'm more into politics, I'll provide something I think is the immediate solution. The first issue is, how do we get to pay our utilities? Because that is the most important thing. All right. You are not going to stay at home, then you get Kenya Power pulling off your lights. You are not going to stay at home, then you don't have water. That is the first issue that the government needs to consider. Okay. The second issue is, how do people meet their obligations in terms of loans, in terms of mortgages, in terms of any other obligations they have.
Which means there must be a continuity.
There must be a continuity. And that is why I said it's high time that the central bank does give directions, not suggestions. Okay. This is not the time for suggestions that let banks engage. No. Say that banks should give a holiday for 2 or 3 months for those people who are paying mortgages, who are paying loans. Because, Ayub, you are not going to sit in the house and yet you know the bank is going to auction you. Yes. The people right now who are in different construction sites, they are there because they don't have any other options. This is now the time. We normally have a strategic grain reserve or something of the sort, where they make losses, yet they are not, the strategic grain reserve, they make losses, yet there's nothing they do. This is the time now they need to come up and say, hey, the amount of food that we have in our stores is this, can be able to sustain us for this particular period. So that then, if we are anticipating a lockdown, then such food should be given to people through the channels which are there from the Ministry of Interior. Okay. Remember that the Ministry of Interior has the capability of spraying people water all the way from JKIA to the CBD. Okay. I think they can have the capability of ensuring that they distribute food all the way to every Kenyan. No Kenyan should die at this particular period because of a lockdown. Okay. I would welcome a lockdown, but then we need to put in measures to ensure that Kenyans do not die of hunger before dying of the disease. Of course, well noted, and elaborate measures must accompany the lockdown in an attempt to ensure that the economy is liquid, is well lubricated, continues to run, and then there's continuity for Kenyans to eat, to live, and of course attend to their day-to-day activities without, of course, much hindrance or hitch. But coming to you, Dr. Juma, a lot of perspectives to talk about this COVID-19, and we'll soon be hearing from the Tanzanian president, that is John Pombe Magufuli, who yesterday issued State of the Nation address in Tanzania in regard to, of course, COVID-19. But still here in the country, when the dust finally settles and we shake off COVID-19, what take-home away lessons do we need to take from the COVID-19 in terms of revamping our healthcare system, paying our doctors well, ensuring that there is a hospitable environment, conducive environment for them to attend to their duties, and allow room for innovation, research and development, so that when the world again, it's inevitable because we are going to be having another pandemic or outbreak, then we'll be at the forefront not only to safeguard our citizens, but equally be part of the upfront responsibility to ensure that we save the globe.
Well, it's a challenge, it's a serious reproof, which should mold us and equip us to face our future better than we are facing it today. Thanks, Wakili. Though I'm very optimistic about our people. Technology actually might really not be the solution or determinant factor on how you grade people's development status or advancement. Looking at the virus itself and its containing measures, there's some things that we can do or overcome even without those technology. Aeration, apart from the little now pollution that is taking place, but our environment lately cannot be compared by Wuhan, where the environment was so polluted.
Many argue nature is cleansing itself.
Exactly. You'll find that even in Ushagos, where there are no aerators, people can survive. Yeah. And if you can keep distance, the best is prevention. Actually, the letdown was the government. The first 2 weeks when this thing happened, they could have actually just locked down any our airport if possible, and monitor this thing for that period.
Okay.
Actually, that's the period when we got hit. And if they are to focus on mitigative measures, it should actually clean up around that area. But meanwhile, sensitize Kenyans, not fearmonger, but let everybody take individual responsibility of sanitizing yourself, keeping distance, and controlling this. The government is more of reactive. But if we really want to talk about preventive measures, it is on you and me.
But Dr. just pause you for purposes of clarity. From the onset, when the first case was confirmed by the CS Health, that is Mutahi Kagwe, social distancing, all the outlined measures, Kenyans have never adhered to them. And owing to our social context in terms of our society, is the society or Kenyans, by extension, not allowing the government or prompting the government to take a lockdown measure? Because the outlines have been clear.
It's all about engagement. You see, compulsive law definitely will lead to repulsion. But if it is self-enforced, it becomes very easy. It becomes a lifestyle.
That's what's absent at the moment,
exactly.
And we agree it's absent at the moment. Kenyans tend to attend overcrowded areas. We see gatherings. We see people still meeting in mosques, in churches. And does it not come from the government?
Ayub, first of all, Daktari, is that probably you have never come out of Nairobi. You need to take a tour in a bus and probably get to the village. Do you know that there are some villages where people don't understand that there is COVID-19? So sometimes when we talk about these issues, the government has a primary role to play, whether national or county government. And I feel that this is where the weakest link began. Because you ask right now my grandmother in the village, she doesn't know what COVID-19 is. She doesn't know what social distancing is. And you see, the government took a lot of time to try and initiate these processes. And remember that we are lucky we have smartphones. We are lucky that we know this information. We are lucky we have a TV. There are people in some areas who even don't know what is going on at the moment. Some people are asking that where are the locusts, and they're being told they're working from home. I saw that joke. And which really shows you the kind of disparity in terms of information, the kind of disparity we have in terms of knowledge. So as Dr. you are saying that the government, that we need to self-enforce some of these regulations, I agree with you. But some of these regulations can only be self-enforced by people like you and I, people who are in some of these better areas, some of those people who really understand. But which initiatives did the government take when the Kilifi deputy governor comes into the country and moves around in funerals and bars and hotels greeting people? So we cannot run away from that government responsibility.
I agree.
Also remember that healthcare is a primary responsibility of the government. They needed to have that precaution measure than the reactive measure. I totally agree up to that point.
I agree.
Yes,
Actually, that was leading me to one of the take-homes. Because one of the changes that this generation, especially Kenyan generation, needs, we've had various types of changes, from colonial government to independent, from one-party state to democracy, from dictatorship to where we are. And right now, we need leadership who are in sync and can vibrate in the global frequency. Not reaction on leaders who issues like this happens and you are playing defense, even with the life of your own people. When citizens are engaged in a holistic way, because if you look at also the attitude of the Italians, actually some...
It was more or less the same.
Of course.
Of course, they went about their other businesses, activities, until the virus hit hard.
When you have leadership which is disciplined, unlike what you've just mentioned in Kilifi, and have the interests of the citizen at heart, people who serve and can sacrifice their life, not these ones who sacrifice others, then you are able to actually put measures. And this is actually the take-home for the citizen. We need to, going forward, have individuals who actually have our priority in their heart, people who feel that, not people who sacrifice us the way they're doing. Because right now, the crowding that you're talking about, why people are still going to jobs, is because they're looking for bread. They want to feed themselves. And the insensitive leaders ought to have come out, because actually the moment to prevent this thing was last week and this week. If we work thoroughly on these 2 weeks, then we will defeat this thing. But this is a moment some people are hiding, praying isolated as a class, and instead of rolling out all that we can, because when you are too late, actually, it will cost you more. If we can roll the best that we can, especially right now, and meet the citizen at their willingness, Because what I have seen with the Nairobians, or even Kenyans at large, I've seen so many people, actually, people are abstaining from churches, apart from few, they are individuals. The churches which closed down, there are mosques which closed down.
And now there will be of course, more churches and mosques gatherings.
Exactly.
I mean, mass gatherings
people
have been
are
outlawed
cancelling
by the
their own
government.
weddings, their own plans.
In one word, in terms of more or less, the two examples we have drawn here. We have the Deputy Governor Kilifi County coming from Germany, and then refusing or rejecting the outlines as outlined by the Minister of Health.
Impunity of highest order.
Yet, of course, he came from one of the affected countries in Europe.
Right.
And the country comes from Germany. The Chancellor Angela Merkel came into contact with a positive person. She is now in self-isolation and quarantine. What does it say about the sort of leadership we have in terms of not only safeguarding his life, but failing to safeguard the lives of the people he came into contact with, in one word?
The leaders we don't need. Because a leader should put your interest first before. That's a leader, a servant leader, who actually will sacrifice their life for you. A leader who will feel you, not just fleece you. A leader who actually, before they do anything, they consider their citizen. But here is a case where they're putting the interest first, not the interest of the citizen, in the center. And such leaders actually should not see the time of the day. We are nearing 2022. Now we clearly know the type of leaders whom we should be looking for come 2022.
Of course. Asante sana. Areba, I'll come back to you after the break here on the program, and we'll equally be having sound bites from the President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Uganda, and his counterpart Tanzania, that is John Pombe Magufuli. You can equally be part of the discussion. This, of course, discussion debate here on New Day Kenya is purposely tailored for you to understand the social, economic, and the political aspect of COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And the number is 0791478990. The hashtag on Twitter is New Day KE. The short SMS code is 40920. Stay tuned. We are coming back after the break here on the program. I'm back here watching the program on the broadcast. This is New Day KE, and we are into the second final segment of the program. Now we take a look at it from the perspective of the East African region, and this is what the President of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, said yesterday, and also the Tanzanian President or his counterpart, John Pombe Magufuli, when he addressed Tanzanians yesterday in regard to the coronavirus pandemic.
This book man, I saw him saying, just like I'm telling you, please stay at home, postpone that business, it can wait. I said, Banang, your book is reasonable. So corona should not be underestimated. I think it can also make people are not reasonable. So the question is, you stay home. If you don't have your own transport, stay home. The managers of those groups, the buses, I have not banned them yet, but I'm appealing to you to minimize the use of those public transport means. But also for the owners of those vehicles, of those systems, to not allow anybody who has got a flu or coughing on a public means of transport.
Hii inatukumbusha umuhimu wa kuomba pindi tunapopata majanga mbalimbali. Hivyo narudia tena kuwasihi viongozi wetu wa dini kuendelea kuliombea taifa letu, lakini pia niwahimize waumini wetu kusali ili kuliombea taifa letu. Kama tusikubali shetani kupitia korona atuvuruge na kumsahau Mwenyezi Mungu. Huu ndio wakati wa kupambana na shetani korona kwa nguvu zote. Nina imani Mungu wetu siku zote atakuwa upande wetu, na mapambano haya yetu dhidi ya korona tutayashinda.
I know there are those who are saying that we should depend on science, not prayers. But I want to assure you that even science needs God. Yeah. So we need to always remember that a nation prospers when a nation believes, when a nation trusts in its maker.
Now, those are President John Pombe Magufuli, Tanzania, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Uganda, and Uhuru Kenyatta, Kenya. Wakili Areba Omoya, if I may come to you. Now, Kenya is ranked position 1 in terms of the overall COVID-19 or coronavirus risk with 27 points, followed by Ghana, 24, Egypt, 23. Owing to some of the measures yesterday, of course, as outlined by the President of Tanzania, that is John Pombe Magufuli, that Tanzania should go about their businesses. It's normal, God will see us through. And it was more or less a concerning point for the World Health Organization, yet they have active cases in Tanzania. It means then that if Tanzania finally submerges in terms of the virus, then hitting home or further cases in Kenya will be inevitable.
Yes.
So where's the coordinated East African response here? Because we seem to be having a breakpoint in terms of what Kenya and Uganda are offering and what Tanzania is offering.
If your history serves you well, you realize that in the East African community, Tanzania has always been that child who belongs to the headmaster, who just does his things the way he wants them to do it, and he doesn't bother about what his neighbors think about. You know the fight that we have been having with Tanzania, confiscating everything that goes across the border, and Magufuli not wanting to attend to other meetings for the East African community. And I was not shocked. You know, what Magufuli is trying to tell us is that, hey, you can go to hell, and I'll be playing music as you go to hell. But then it will end in premium tears. I can promise you that. Remember that we have all said that we need divine intervention, but then we don't need divine intervention foolishly. Remember, when if you were keen during the national prayers at State House, remember that the clergy walked in and washed their hands first.
Despite being the men of God.
Despite being the men of God. And even when the president walked in, he had to sanitize. Of course, his was very casual. It was just a sign that, hey, we are doing this. So what I'm trying to say is that whereas we say that we are looking for divine intervention, and whereas if you look at the holy books, they all try to tell you that the high man above cannot be able to give you what you cannot be able to contain. But we should not be foolishly and stupidly following and looking for divine intervention. We need to keep those measures. If Tanzania are really saying that, hey, we'll be salvaged because of divine intervention, they should proceed and close down all their hospitals. Let them get a corona person and take him to State House. So sometimes as leaders, when we say about something, I mean, sit down and think about what you have just said and think whether in an event where you need to again look back at the same words, let's say 2 months down the line, you can be able to stand by that. Remember that we have a very porous border with our East African community neighbors. I was in Busia a couple of weeks ago, and we are walking across the border. And remember that this virus can not only be transmitted by people, it can also be transmitted in surfaces. I mean, a vehicle can come from across the border and have it transmitted. So I think we really need to reevaluate our relationship with our neighbors in these times of distress. Because at the end of the day, we have countries to manage. We have our citizens. Remember, our citizens rank first.
Okay.
Then the neighborhoodness and the foreign policy come second. So for Tanzanians' case, it will end in premium tears.
Okay, and of course, there are lessons to learn from in terms of the context that were provided in the opening stages of the discussion in regard to Japan and Italy in misjudging the situation or misreading the situation. If I may come to Daktari, Kenya is a transport hub, especially for the landlocked countries in this African community. You talk about Uganda, South Sudan, Burundi, Rwanda, who all depend on the port of Mombasa for what comes into their countries. But given that and the situation at the moment that we are having in regard to the economic aspect internally, Kenyans now galvanizing around a course on how to go about a lockdown, what will happen within. Does it concern you, or is it a point of concern equally for the government that whatever happens in Tanzania, if they mishandle the situation, is going to be having a reverberation effect on not only Kenya's healthcare system, but equally on the economy?
Definitely. And of course, being a gateway, there are pros and cons. And I think the pros are what actually the leaders actually made the leaders to overlook certain security measures which could have protected us from where we are now. And our neighbors, of course, good neighborhood can also prevent and actually ease. Though from Magufuli's perspective, it's true that faith overrides and is stronger than fear. And they say human diseases, about 80% of them are emotional. And if faith can sort out that emotional aspect, then your immunity system will be stable to handle the 20%. And if the 20% is coupled with the discipline of how to handle or go about the virus, then I think that society will be much better off. Whatever state or statement is making, if it is accompanied by other disciplines and sanitization that actually can defeat this virus, then they are well off. I would not actually advise people not to turn to their creator and advise them to worship wherever they are. Actually,
but it's a case of, isn't it, when there's a concern and a consensus among the international community that Africa does not have robust healthcare system which is up to par in terms of response to the coronavirus pandemic. And then you say that, I mean, isn't it not a case? Yes, God is the ultimate authority. His power and miracle is behind our comprehension. But isn't it not a case of you practicing tie your camel, trust your God?
But you see, faith comes with knowledge, and knowledge has discipline and understanding. And there can be no faith without knowledge on how to walk. Because the same books of faith that talks about cleanliness next to
godliness.
Yeah, so this virus, the principles that we need to deal with it are based around all those same regimens. Actually, if you want to find most disciplined people in the world are spiritual, faithful people, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
Definitely.
Depends, of course,
in a number of cases.
Well, we can have a theology debate about it.
Exactly. So I would really not, castigate or look down upon how he is exalting. That is his approach, which has a place, but it should be accompanied by equivalent discipline in handling what? Whether it's scientific or biological, the same measures of keeping distance, sanitization, and all this. If he couples that with that, then he will have more healthier society than that. But going back to Kenyan case, Kenya being a gateway, we need to play much more smarter.
Okay, allow me to pick this call. I'll come back to you, and then we hear from you and equally Wakili here on set. We are joined by now Otieno from home, Donholm in Nairobi County. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Mr. Ayub.
Good morning to you. Habari ya asubuhi, my brother.
Niko salama.
I suppose you are home. Leo ni kama hujafungua biashara.
Manze, ni kubaya. Number one, hii kitu is serious. And sisi wa Kenya tunachukua like a joke. Juzi, I was discussing this issue about coronavirus with other guys. Unajua, most of Kenyans hawatrust government. Unasikia mtu anasema, hakuna coronavirus Kenya. Government inacheza na watu. I'm wondering, are these people seeing what is happening in Italy? Are these people seeing what has happened in China? Yesterday, nimetoka safari Mombasa juzi. You can't imagine. Mombasa wamefanya vile serikali inataka. Everything is closed down. Biashara yote imesimama. Nimekuja na Modern Coast kutoka Mombasa mpaka hapa watu 15 peke yake kwa gari mzima. And I was even wondering, how are these people going to get the profit? Because the transport is only 1,100. Kukuja hapa Nairobi, hapa Mall Donholm, Greenspan Mall. Trust me not. Even I posted in my Facebook yesterday. These Kenyans, we are not serious. And hii kitu government imeka hizi restriction so that hii ugonjwa iziwa overwhelm. Because tuko over 47 million. Sisi wote tukipatikana, madaktari wako wangapi? You know, we have to come back. I think serikali inafaa iangalia another alternative.
Okay.
Hata kama ni kufungua masimba zikuwe kwa street ili watu waogope wakae kwa nyumba. Greenspan Mall imejaa mpaka watoto wanacheza. You are wondering, hawa ni watu wazima wamewaleta ama ni mtu watumi? Is it that we are ignorant or stupid?
Asante sana. Thank you so much. Of course, well noted point as part of his concerns on an individual level, and what he says is perhaps the impact it's having on businesses as part of the profit-making process, which seems now will be slumped as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, actually, without proper economic mitigation, definitely people will still go outside. And Wakili, on the faith, I'm not saying that people need to congregate. Actually, the church is not the building. The church is you as what?
Of course.
As an individual.
It's a link between you and God.
Or the mosque, yes. So you can still worship where you are and still uphold your faith with discipline without doing what? Affecting others. And as Otieno says, where the governments come in is in such challenges. How do I harmonize the issues that are driving people to get out of their houses? How can I address them? See, if you address the root cause, then it's very easy for people to hold back. And as we are saying, we are talking today, if somebody does not have actually something to put on the table for the children,
okay,
and they are crying in the house and you are a man, what would you do? You'll have to get on the road. And these are the challenges that are facing us. So if we could, and the point I needed to add on you, on what you said earlier, is that the government have the infrastructure and the system, the capacity to sensitize Kenyans. Look at the chiefs all the way. The population
the hierarchy
that a chief have, even assistant chief down there within the location. And plus that, we have the political aspect where you have an MCA with a ward administrator and village elders. All of that is a very simple structure that can be used. Actually, within 1 week, the government education system and network should have reached the people on the grassroots. Yet, to date, we are still talking about Wamama. They all don't have to be communicated to in English.
Okay.
Chiefs knows the language that all their people do what. So all we need to do is bring them to understand the seriousness of this thing, that if we can prevent, because that is to, actually for real, that is our way out is prevention. Because when you talk about curing and all that, these reaction systems the government is going through, the government lacks the capacity and our infrastructure cannot support. So we need to emphasize and spend more on prevention than any other thing.
Okay,
yes,
and that prevention, of course, call or prevention measures must be across board in the African continent, because some argue, I hosted a virologist here on Thursday night, and they argued that Africa had head start in terms of the virus and could come up with preventive mechanisms, because before it hit the continent, it ravaged China, then came to Europe. They underestimated it until it hit Europe. The attention was on Europe, and then it came to Africa upon the first confirmation of the case in Cairo, in Egypt. Areba Moyo Samba, still on the African context, away from the East African region, we have, of course, many countries that will struggle in terms of their exports. For instance, Africa's raw materials, in terms of the outline, oil exports, and we have Angola and Congo-Brazzaville in China mainly, and Nigeria, which is the continent's biggest oil producer. 1/3 of that goes to Europe, the European Union, and they gain about $1.3 billion US. That is the importance of the oil in terms of revenues to the Nigerian economy. Now, I'll come back to you in terms of other countries that I'll mention, but allow me to pick this call from John Adamba, calling us from the county of Bungoma. Good morning, John.
Bushere sana Abudi.
Bushere, habari ya asubuhi John.
Haya, huko kwetu Bungoma ni mzuri sana, alafu huko kwetu Nairobi.
Bado hamjapata kesi yoyote ya corona?
Mimi sisi watu wa Bungoma hatujawahi kushuhudia kisa kama hicho, na ningependa kusema tunadumisha usafi zaidi. Watu wanaoga pale, ukipiga duka ya baada ya nyingine mpaka uoge mkono. So, wacha niseme namna hivi.
Alright.
Corona. Huyu mtu anaitwa corona. Hii shetani inaitwa corona. Ile nchi inavyoendelea, my friend, tunaenda kupata janga la njaa. Especially on the side of eco.
Okay.
Uchumi wao kutoteka sana. Na napenda kusema hivi. Kama Mungu anasikia maombi yetu.
Okay.
Mungu Mwenyezi sikia maombi yetu. Mungu Mwenyezi, Mungu wa Ibrahim, Mungu wa Isaka na Yakobo, asikie maombi yetu, atuokolee hili janga. Kwa sababu Abudi, niseme namna hii, ishara zinaenda zikizoroteka baada ya dakika. Watu watu hata wengine wameanza kusema hata afadhali njaa kuliko corona.
Okay.
Afadhali njaa kuliko corona. Kwa maana ukiangalia Abdi, mtu anakula kutoka kwa mkono hadi kwa mdomo.
Okay.
Afanye kazi ndio akule. Na yule mtu mahali anafanya kazi, ukiangalia uchumi vile nimesema unateka kama transport, angalia kama education, angalia kama especially judiciary sector na mambo kama hayo. Na mambo kama hayo. So kwa sitazungumzia sana. Ningeomba Mungu atafutie dawa ipatikane, hali ya kirudi katika ile hali iliyokuwa jana.
All right. Asante sana. Thank you so much, John Adamba, calling us from the county of Bungoma in Mulembe Nation. Yes, I was on you.
Yes, back
no, I was on Areba Wakili. Right. In regard to, of course, the African economy, away from this African context, in regard to why there seems to be no coordinated response at the South African level. Again, the other element is the African economy, which will generally take a hit. For instance, oil exports to China, Angola and Congo Brazzaville lead. Nigeria, the biggest oil producer in the continent, 1.3 billion to the EU. But you have a pause in China. You have border closures in the European continent. And this will come home to hit Kenya. Equally, is an exporter of flour, tea and pyrethrum to the European Union. Ethiopia may struggle for, of course, its exports, which are coffee to outside world. Ivory Coast, cocoa, Zambia, butter, and copper. And when you look at that, how will the African economy then, in the midst of the calamity now, immune the sort of the ailing African economy and post-COVID-19, perhaps coalesce around a cause to revamp the continent's economy?
I think this now comes into what really the governments have put in place to caution their economies. Remember that most of the time when it comes to recession, African countries have rarely been hit. If you look at the history, most of the time the European countries and the Western countries are the ones which have been hit. But luckily, is that they have always had measures in terms of salvaging the economies. Now it's the time that now African countries, we need to see all this that they have been saying that we have put in measures to ensure that our economy stays afloat. It's now time to see those actual measures. And I feel that the government has a big role again to play in terms of that. The government needs to come out and now the issues of the reserves in their banks, the issues of utilities, the issues of loans, because right now the primary...
Okay, Areba, can I just pick this call and then I'll come back to you? Sorry for the intervention. This is Desmond calling us from the county of Uasin Gishu in Eldoret. That is... good morning. Good morning to you. Habari asubuhi. Good morning. Are you still there? Okay, we'll come back to you. Hopefully, he'll call back. Yes, Areba, go ahead, please.
So now, one of the things is that now it's time to see which measures have the governments put in place. You know, we always talk that, oh, the government has put in all our speeches, the government has put in measures to ensure that the economy remains. The government has done that, the government has done that. Now it's the time to actually see what's real that the government has done. But I'm a little bit disappointed with already what we are seeing from most African countries. Can I tell you why? If you look at the African politicians, this is now the time to shine in the midst of calamity. This is the time they have realized that they can buy jerrycans and fix them with taps and label them with their names and put them around markets to just gain some kind of idiotic popularity to show that they are ready for corona.
Okay, let's get back to the, of course, the viewer at home, who is our panel at home. This is Yegon calling us from the county of Nakuru. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Morning to you. Habari asubuhi.
Nzuri sana nauliza. Nauliza hii homa ni homa aina gani? Sababu kuna homa ya kawaida kama hii yenye ukiangalia hiyo symptom yenye tumeambiwa kama ile inatuaffect tu kawaida.
Okay.
Sasa ni homa aina gani? Wewe waambia wangwana tueleze vizuri. Ndio tuelewe kabisa, sababu homa kama hiyo yenye wanasema, hata kama kuna zaidi kuna watu wana experience kama hizo.
Okay, asante sana. We will give you the medical response. Tutakujulisha mengi kesho asubuhi. Kutakuwa na daktari hapa ambaye atakuelezea kuhusu homa ya corona. Hopefully you'll be tuned in so you can get the medical, of course, explanation, how it spreads, which parts of the body it affects. Of course, the longevity period, how the virus survives. So tomorrow, hopefully by the grace of God, you'll be tuned. We'll be having a virologist here on set and he'll give you the medical perspective and you'll understand more as regards to the question that you have posed. And thank you for calling. And immediately after this show, of course, in about an hour's time, you'll be having my doctor show, which will be live by my colleague, Winnie Lubembe, and they will be talking more about that. So, of course, if you tune in, then you'll be able to get an understanding and a perspective to that. And thank you for your call from the county of Nakuru. Asante sana. Yes, Areba, go ahead, please. You are on the tap, I mean, the jerrycan taps.
What I was trying to say is that we have some kind of little disappointment from the so-called leaders. I don't know what happens, whether we put in a lot of faith in terms of leadership and then the leaders put in little effort in terms of the response we get. And I was telling you that right now I'm very disappointed with most leaders because you look at the kind of measures they are putting in place to deal with this situation are measures that can even be put by a class 3 student. I mean, the issue of putting taps of water and a 5-liter jerrycan then half of that 5-liter jerrycan is covered with your name and the position that you are vying, instead of having a poster in terms of what needs to be done. I saw what Shofco did in Kibera and Mathare. They put hand-washing equipment, but they didn't bother to write who has put them there. But for me, if I get to buy a 5-liter container and put some water,
you have to label it.
I feel that now I have, it's like I'm an in-law to Jesus Christ. I have to label it, why I have bought it and what I'm vying for. And the writings are so many, until others you have to write on the wall that what you're vying for. That is not the type of leadership that we want. The type of leadership that we want is, one, which kind of policy interventions are we putting in place right now to come out of this? Number two, which kind of preparedness are we putting so that in future, if something like this comes, how are we able to come out of this? This is not the time to go to marketplaces and say, hey, we're going to supply sanitizers for free. Leadership can do better. And whatever that government say that they have put in place and the mechanisms that they have put in place, this is the time now to show us what are they putting in place, or was it on paper?
Okay, Dr. Juma, still with regards to the context of course, the report issued in terms of the risk exposure of the African economies respectively across the continent to the COVID-19. And then when you come back home, still on the aspect of course, the report at some point issued by Oxfam, which is a non-governmental organization centered in London in the UK. And then you have 8,000 Kenyans who own as much as 47 million Kenyans. That again brings forth the aspect of the growing disparity between the rich and the poor, which is the main point of concern, and I'm sure policymakers are considering that in regards to if there will be a lockdown. However, do we need to shift from a capitalistic state of affairs to perhaps a collective state of affairs in regard to addressing general problems that affect generally in terms of the common wananchi, and how do we make Kenyans access affordable healthcare and flatten curve in terms of accessibility for all Kenyans? Is it the time perhaps to learn and effectively implement, call into and to action one of the Big Four agenda, which of course is a PLM President's Big Four agenda, that is the healthcare, universal healthcare coverage?
Well, it's a real test to our humanness, especially exposing the type of leadership that we have and exposing us as a society. I've seen some people, some tycoons are actually donating money to Kenya.
Including Jack Ma.
Exactly. And mass donation actually has reached, actually is helping. And you wonder why an outsider will be touched that quick. Yet a local person who actually has built his wealth on the sweat and blood of the same citizen who is languishing in poverty, just right at his nose does not actually cannot see. So actually it exposed the nature of leadership that we have. And collectively as Africa or East Africa per se, how we can address these issues that are actually the pandemic issues. By the way, this is not the first time these things are occurring.
Of course, we have global history.
Yes,
in modern times crisis.
In 2004, we had SARS. In 2008, we had avian flu still. In 2010, we had swine flu. In 2012, we had MERS flu. In 2016, we had 2014, we had Ebola.
Yes, in West Africa. And
in 2016, we had Zika flu still. And in 2018, we had Ebola. And you know what it happened also majorly.
Of course, in Rwanda, Partly, DRC, and in
now
Uganda.
In 2020, we're having Corona.
Which means there will be a continuity. Pandemics will be there. They're inevitable.
Yes, so, and sorry to say, all those years, normally one country is having election. All those years.
I mean, you're citing the Americans.
So in terms of predictability, it's only a fool who does the same thing, the same style, expecting a different result. Africa should by now wake up to reality and expect and be ahead of the game in the event that this pandemic comes. What should be the measures that we should put in place? But not always waiting for help. We have everything it takes. All we need to do is manage. Even here locally, right now it's very easy to tell KRA to go easy. You don't need to collect taxes in
incentives, I mean.
Exactly. This time you can easy to talk with Kenya Power and tell them, you know what, all this utility, you understand, and say, you know, we'll provide water for free and avail water so that everybody can clean themselves, isn't it? And it's easy also to say, like he's saying, the NCPB unleash the cereals that we have
Okay.
and meet out the needs of the people for just this period so that we overcome this. Those are measures that can be done. But the problem is the leadership, you don't understand what they are doing and actually their position, their take, and even these things, what they are meant to do. It's easy even to tell Kenyan landlords. It's very easy. We know Kenyans are very human. We've seen Kenyans coming together. Go easy on your what? We can do mitigation on your rent. You understand?
Yes.
And make sure that Kenyans have an easy life for this period so that all these menaces can be controlled. But unfortunately, the capitalism nature that you're talking about actually is eating us to the core, actually is killing more than even the flus and the pandemics that we're going through. So if we could get to a point where we can review how we do things, we don't have necessarily to always harm. And I think this has revealed. Always teach your children in public schools.
Okay.
You can always homeschool and have that as an alternative. The government now needs to adopt that as a national alternative education where you equip parents. Because right now, when the rubber meets the road, the government has run away from our children and have chased them all back to our homes. And the government is asking you to feed them, take care of them, with no help. Because you are the primary, you are the one, you have the primary responsibility of that child.
And the need for, of course, a social set of welfare to help the parents in terms of raising the kids.
Yes, we must have initiatives in place which allow the parents and citizens to be in charge of their life, even including education, as I've said. So going forward, I think we have a lot of take-homes that we can actually reconsider going forward on how we are doing things. You can have alternatives, not just go with the conventional that we've been presented with, which sometimes when the rubber meets the road like this, do not necessarily work.
Okay, yes, Areba, the final words. Of course, you wanted to respond to, I'm sure, the aspect about the American elections and why these things do transpire,
I think
certainly in an election year in the US.
He has an interesting theory, that of a magician and not a doctor. but then, for me, I don't really get down to analyze some of those things. For me, it's about facts and the law. But I'll be quite interested to learn about that. But then, from my point of view is that, we are now teaching people on national TV on the basics, like washing your hands.
Common sense.
Common sense. I mean, did we have to wait for a pandemic to come and tell us that you need to wash your hands? Did we need to wait for a pandemic to tell us to sanitize? So some of these issues are issues that we really look down upon, but they really matter when rubber hits the road. And also for the primary healthcare service providers, which is mainly the government. And I asked this last week. If you cannot have water in a hospital facility 24/7, what makes you think that then you can be able to deal with a pandemic? And this is time that we need to look at our systems and ensure that they are ready. We should avoid the issue of vyombo vya wageni. When you see visitors, that is the moment when you open up the cupboard and remove some kind of fancy-looking plates. And that is what the government is doing right now. And for some of the governors out there, an ICU bed does not just mean a bed with a bed sheet. You need to look up and learn from the experts. This is, again, the time I said we need to listen to expert advice. Sometimes I look through social media and I see some kind of idiocy that is there from people who, by the virtue of having smartphones and bundles, think that they have now the courage and they have the information to pass out. Let's look up to professionals. Let's listen to professional advice. And I think at the end of the day, we shall be fine as a country.
Okay, given that, let's now have a final word here. Dr. if I may come to you. Given the state of affairs as to, of course, what's happening across the globe, the coronavirus pandemic, there are some who prophesize that it might last long. Some, of course, seem to be optimists and that very soon it will be controlled. But given the state of affairs across the globe, in China, for example, 100 million Chinese nationals have lost their jobs. We have cut downs in the European continent. Airlines are cutting their trips across the world. That, again, affects the global chain supply of effects, all across the globe. And given what's happening at the moment in the Kenyan context and globally, if the virus lasts for long, will it cause, in your view, and this is a very philosophical question, will it cause destabilization in terms of crime rates that might go high and surge?
It's already causing already. Actually, as time goes, it can get worse. But based on those previous let me call the pandemics that we've experienced in those other years that I've mentioned, they always come to an end. And when they come to an end, I think it's a test as humanity, it tests our resolve. Also actually tries us to be able to face life outside the conventional ways on how we've been raised. And actually, it is an opportunity.
Okay.
You see some politicians take those opportunity to brand themselves by the containers, like provide the containers the way
5-liter branded containers.
Right. People take that opportunity differently. But as a nation, that can be an opportunity to set up mechanisms, long-lasting mechanisms. Because most of the cases you've seen when a building collapses, we run and we get this and we get that, and once that case is done, then you don't know whether all the machines run down or because another case happens, and we go back to the same vicious cycles. You saw what happened in Likoni ferry issue.
Of course.
Trying to get the lady from the bottom of the sea.
And then days later, another one happened.
Exactly. So all these situations should prepare us so that we look at our life in the long term. And we should expect these things. Even as Africa by now, AU should be ready and cushion their people from this, if they are global wars or political wars or trade wars.
Okay.
We must know our position. But if possible, now good leadership can be very proactive. And if possible, also benefit from this. Benefit such that, who knows, Africa can turn out to be an economic powerhouse based on how we play it. And Kenya, by the way, can turn out to be economic powerhouse based on how, because actually the recession is not being felt by Kenya alone. But how we come out of this?
It's a global impact.
Unfortunately, some of our leaders are still looking at it as a begging bag that they are using to receive help from what? Whereas we can get other mechanisms to actually play along this and make sure that this is also going to change our economic, is a paradigm change for our economic well-being, such that we can also be equal in the face of humanity, which is very possible.
Well noted point. And most importantly is how Africa needs to end the begging bowl culture.
Right.
And of course, how it trades with China is also very important in regard to the 200 billion Kenya shillings trade. And the sort of this scramble and partition in the 21st century as America counters the Chinese influence in the continent, the United Kingdom looking into Africa, post-Brexit, how it needs to maintain relations, especially countries that were, of course, colonized by the British, and how China is equally anchoring its presence in Africa with regards to President Xi Jinping's pet projects, which are equally global, and in terms of the three-pronged approach of UK or the London, Beijing, China, Washington, in the United States of America's approach for the African continent. I mean, readily available market, young people, energetic, labor available. But the point is how the African leaders will balance the cards. Daktari, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Welcome.
And thank you for showing up on the program. Areba Omoyo Samba is advocate of the High Court, commentator on affairs that regard governance and political issues. Daktari is the party leader, Justice and Freedom Party in the country. And thank you to you too for the calls from the... Yes, of course. You never knew?
A political party.
Well, these are Kenya who need to be a bit informed. But at least welcome.
Is a presidential contender.
Justice and Freedom Party.
Do you want a running mate?
Welcome to a party, and we invite all because we are thinking of alternatives to render these solutions that we're talking about.
To that party.
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that I'm seated with a potential president here.
Well, he must have been some heartbeats away from the presidency.
Karibu sana wakili.
Okay, I thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We promise to be available going forward.
Okay, thank you so much for the calls from the counties of Nairobi, Bungoma, Uasin Gishu and Nakuru. And thank you for, of course, the response on the 40920 short SMS code. The number has been 07914789990. Our continuous coverage of the COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic continues tomorrow by the grace of God, and we'll be talking to experts in the field, virologists, who will be giving you an understanding, a perspective into the pandemic that has ravaged the global economy, societal setup, and equally the political aspect of it. And you can't, of course, imagine travel and tourism, travel bans, mass quarantine made mandatory, mass gatherings outlawed, global gloomy economic GDP prospect in terms of what many equate to the 2008 financial crisis. And Africa, of course, has more than 500 cases, Kenya among them, and has a number 15 at the moment, standing at that as per the confirmation cases, 8 yesterday by the CS Mutahi Kagwe. In about an hour's time, Winnie Lubembe will be here with my doctor, more about, of course, the pandemic, as she, of course, will offer insight into what needs to be done, what needs not to be done, and of course, as you get an understanding of the COVID-19, we are the epicenter of the crisis at this time. Members of the Fourth Estate will be balancing the aspect between objectivity, the truth, and will be your meter in terms of the measure of what you will understand, what you will digest, what you need to know, what you need to understand, and of course, as you get informed regularly by the government. I'm Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. We'll see you tomorrow by the grace of God. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. Good morning.